This is Hero of Sparta. 4 years have passed since the start of the war against the Macedonians, and it would only take one more before the Macedonians would become history. While he may be about to win one more, there would still be many more to come. In the transition to the next turn, our ships are once more attacked by the Macedonians, though once more proving his worth, Polydoros takes care of them with ease. Once again over the summer, Cleomenes finds another potential adoptee, Teleus of Eretria. While Teleus did have Drill Master under his traits, he seemed otherwise competent enough to manage cities. Teleus' first move is to Corinth to hopefully increase its happiness. The Brutii have loaded up another Pyrene, which we were most certainly not going to allow anywhere near our shores. Polydoros takes on Admiral Augustus and sends the cowardly Romans fleeing, with Polydoros closely pursuing behind. With peasants moved up, Hero could begin the march to Bylazora, building the good old 3 pieces of siege equipment. The peasants make themselves at home and lower the tax rate to something a bit more bearable. Teleos, having finished his education, moves from Athens to Larissa, his end goal being the freshly conquered cities to the north. Teleus moves to Athens to try and learn from the academy. Much to the north, our diplomat finally finds civilization along the road. Greeting the Germanians, he secures trade rights, but once more fails to get map information. Oh well, there will be others.
Yes, master. No more moves, sir.
Another turn ends and another adoptee, though this time Hero is the benefactor. Orius was young and he had potential to be a good manager. He would be perfect. And a monumental occasion in the Greek city's history has occurred. The faction was finally turning a profit by itself. While it may have been a small number, it had the potential to grow and grow as their empire would too. Polydoros finally catches up with Augustus and sends them fleeing once more. The Admiral was getting tired of these games of cat and mouse he constantly seemed to be playing.
Yes, ramming speed! Out of move, sir!
Teleos makes his way to Thessalonica and raises the tax rates as his first action, and Hero begins the siege of Bylazora. The Macedonian leader, much like his predecessors, was a bit of a disappointment, though Hero realises most, if not all, of the generals would be a disappointment when compared to himself. Bylazora has the same simple layout as all minor cities. Rams are deployed on either side of the city, manned by a unit of Spartans and backed by a unit of Cretans. The battle begins and the Rams to the east and west begin moving in. While the southern Cretans are moved forward to soften the defences. The lightly armoured Peltas stood no chance against the Cretan arrows. The Rams eventually make it to the gates, the archers on all sides of the city making short work of any opposition in front of them. With the Peltas cleared, the eastern Rams could now safely approach. 1 gate down, 2 to go.
Our battering ram has done its work.
Now only 3 units of Macedonians remained of the faction, and the faction leader was just about to walk into the range of a unit of Cretan archers. 2 gates down.
The enemy gate
Now
is
for the
home.
final
Our
crawl through the
battering ram
Macedonian
has done its
streets.
work.
The Macedonian leader foolishly hangs around within the range of the archers, and his bodyguards feel the repercussions of his decision. 3 gates
The
down.
enemy gate is down. Our battering ram has done its work.
It was time for the final battle. The streets were filled with Spartans and there was no escape for the Macedonians now. The archers in range start picking off the remaining Macedonians while the rest get into position. They were able to draw the general off of the plaza, and he and the remaining few members of his bodyguard met their fates at the end of Spartan steel, much like the many, many members of Macedonian royalty before them.
The enemy king lies dead at your feet. Now is the time to...
Now, only militia hoplites remained. In an attempt to keep hold of their city, they marched towards one of the Spartans, not taking into account that the other 2 groups would move in their absence. The militia quickly break, but the Spartans, perhaps feeling generous, allowed the militia to keep fighting for their capital city and way of life. Though one can't be sure whether it was generosity that fueled the decision. Some say the Spartans refused the surrender to play with their helpless prey much like a cat would with a mouse. Either way, history is written by the victors.
This is a heroic worthy of great soldiers.
And victors the Spartans appeared to be. Losing 1 man in the end, it could be considered a fair trade for the slaughter that happened. Now that money was coming into the bank, deviations from the norm could now begin. Hero captures Polydoros and keeps her population intact for once, perhaps overcoming his bloody ways. We'll expand on the real reasons later. As more importantly, the Macedonians were no more. Orius starts his journey to Athens for education and the turn ends. Massively outnumbered, Polydoros is attacked by pirates, but he wins by a clear margin.
We are victorious!
Finances are looking positive, but we still have some time to come until we'll be spending again. Orius finishes his journey and Teleus joins Teleos in Thessalonica, ready for either one to move up to Polydoros when Hero moves on. Polydoros engages with Augustus once again and predictably wins once more, sending the enemy fleet fleeing again. With a sigh, Polydoros pursues.
Set sail! Out of move, sir! Sir!
With peasants ready to step in, Hero leaves Polydoros to take care of the rebel army that prowled the entrance to the valley.
My lord!
Pushing back the rebels, Hero decides not to pursue them further, as just on the horizon he could see a sizable Thracian army. The rebels would work as a decent buffer if the Thracians decide to come and visit. With Byzantium still owned by the rebels, one should hope that the Thracians keep their distance. Another turn and another pirate attack, though this time from Macedonian pirates, of which Polydoros unfortunately loses, though perhaps it worked to his advantage as Admiral Augustus was now in view. It was a risky attack, being as weakened as his fleet was, but Poseidon was on his side this day and the Romans were sunk.
We are victorious! Set sail! Out of move, sir!
The new year also brings a new son for Sparta and a wife for Teleus. Welcome to the world, Amnestos. For his honeymoon and for being the better commander, Teleus goes to Polydoros, while Hero, now Hero the Conqueror, begins his travels to the south to Termon.
Destroy them! Out of move, sir!
Another turn and more pirates that Polydoros defeats. More money enters the treasury and Teleos gets married too.
Ready!
With 12 ships remaining, it was time to get Polydoros back to safe harbour.
Set sail! Out of move, sir!
Another turn, and of course more pirates, though this time it was the ex-Macedonian fleet once more.
The sea is out!
The odds were stacked against Polydoros, but he's scraped through by the skin of his teeth. Polydoros finally makes it back to Sparta, looking a lot worse for wear than he did when he left those many years ago. After a year or so of marching, Hero finally makes it to the gates of Termon. He orders the creation of his 3 rams and calls it a day.
Settlement, sir! Settlement under siege, sir!
Much to the north, our diplomat finally finds another soul after wandering through the wilds. Approaching the Briton army, he puts on his Greek charm and secures trade rights and exchanges map information. Interesting, it appears that the Britons had yet to expand. One might say they are going to fall behind. Another turn and the rams of Termon are ready. After facing the Macedonians, the rebels would be light work. Seeing as their force consisted mostly of lightly armoured peasants and peltasts, the Cretan archers would make quick work of this city. Today would be target practice for the Cretans. While a single ram approached the gates, the archers rained arrow after arrow after arrow down on the poorly armoured rebels. Bodies lined the streets, and before long the Spartans broke through the gates.
The enemy gate is down! Our battering ram has done its work!
The rebel general tried to lead his men from the front, but his lightly armoured comrades stood no chance against the archers that blotted out the sun with their arrows. With only one man remaining beside himself, the general Nearchos limped his way back to the town centre, where the last of his men remained. He mustered his courage together, he stood tall, and with a solemn frown he began what he knew would be his final speech. I fear no man, living or dead. I do not expect the same of you, but in battle, remember this. The coward dies 1,000 times, a brave man only once. Fight well, and you will not notice death when he comes for you. He walked through the crowd of his fellow peasants, stopping before his younger brother, Nicandros. He reached out and grasped his shoulder. I am proud of you. I am proud of you all. We stand here as free men, and no matter what happens on this day, know that the fields of Elysium await us all. He finished his speech in time to turn around and see the Greek general charging down the streets of the town Nearchos called home. He gripped Nicandros' shoulder once more before turning to face the Greek butcher. While he and his men may have had no hope against the heavy cavalry, Nearchos would try his damnedest to take out as many of them as he could. Hero and his men cut through the peasants with ease, taking out the rebel captain relatively quickly.
The enemy general is slain, and now his men fear us!
Though the pesky things were able to cut down 3 of his horsemen with the toothpicks they wielded. But in the end, they too were no match for Hero. Being a town of lower population, Termon is captured. The general population appearing to be way too happy, but the large town was generating a nice and tidy sum. From Corinth, a unit of hoplites moved to occupy Termon the next turn.
Onward! Moves depleted, sir!
And so another year ends and another city is within our grasp. At our current rate of earning, within 3 more turns we will finally be out of debt. Another son and daughter are born into the family, turning our once humble family of 3 to 15 members. With a quick merging of units, Hero sets out north to capture the final immediate rebel city, Apollonia. The the hoplites quickly settling in the vacant spaces left behind the mega army. Euclides finally finds the Gaul and negotiates trade rights, but as what appears to be a running theme now, fails to trade map information. Winter arrives again, and we have received news that the Julii and Germania have formed an alliance. While not too concerning in of itself, we would have to keep it in consideration for when it came time to expand our northern borders. To the south, Polydoros spots yet another Brutii fleet filled to the brim with soldiers. The old admiral gave a weary sigh. The Brutii could not be allowed anywhere near the Greek shores, but his fleet was severely damaged, reduced down to 7 ships. It was a risk, but what is life without a few risks? Sailing out to meet the Romans, they were of equal strength. Steeling himself for what could be his final battle, Polydoros ordered the attack. It was a rough battle, with Polydoros losing 75% of his fleet, but the Romans losing it all. Hero finally reaches Opolina and builds his 3 rams. Back to the north, we find the shadow of a fort within our borders and find that it is Thracian and rather full, which brings us back to why we occupied Bylazora. The Thracians for some reason allied themselves with both Scythia and Dacia, leaving themselves boxed in with only one way to go: down. With the exception of Byzantium, the Greeks are the only other neighbour this faction has, meaning that one day, and possibly soon, they're going to be knocking on our doors. And Bylazora is going to be the choke point between the Greeks and the Thracians. So when we get the money, we will have the population ready to be recruited for that front line. And with the Thracian diplomat who has hovered for a year now, Bylazora may be facing that battle sooner rather than later. Though, for now, peace reigns. With more Roman fleets becoming apparent, Polydoros moves to the port of Termon to act as a last line of defence if the worst is to happen. The financial report is promising, and more interesting diplomacy occurs, with another faction joining in the war against our fellow Hellenic faction. The Seleucids surely can't be doing too well at this point. No matter, we had our own faction to think about. The siege of Opolina can begin. Manned by mostly peasants, Hero once more has the run-of-the-mill battle ahead of him. Not bothering with any fancy tactics, Hero commits to a frontal assault, with Spartans manning the ram and the archers softening up the foe. Arrows rain from the sky, taking out the rebels with ease. Rebel after rebel fell to the ground, impaled with arrows, and the Spartans hadn't even made it to the gates yet. This was no battle, it was a slaughter.
Our soldiers are at the gates! Now they must batter a way through! Our soldiers have done their work well! The ram has broken through the gate!
With the gates down, the elimination of the rebels was inevitable. The Spartans filed into the streets, and the Cretans followed behind, filling one side of the city with just their bodies. A unit stepped forward and started firing down on the plaza, eliminating the captain. Now, only a unit of militia hoplites remained. The hoplites advanced on the Spartans, but, as many have before them, broke before they even made it to the line. They made easy pickings for the 786 archers that lined the streets. Down to the last 2, they did not last long.
This victory is surely their work, not the...
Victory and honor! Settlement captured!
There was not much profit to be made off of the town, seeing as the mass extermination in this case was just 95 people. Let us just occupy this town. Despite being quite small, Apollonia was rather profitable for a settlement of 495 people. Another summer comes to its end and Euclides continues his tour around Europe, happening upon a Julii diplomat. On a whim, he offered a ceasefire to the man, not at all expecting the rival diplomat to accept it, and his prediction was correct. Oh well, it was worth a shot. What was unexpected was what the Thracian diplomat by Polydoros finally came up with. An alliance and map information, huh? Well, one of those things we already had, and well, you know what they say, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. In any case, we will not be the ones known as alliance breakers. Finally, it only took 11 years, but at last we were out of debt. And with profits of just under 6,000 denarii, there was no doubt that soon we would be swimming in gold.